Hey guys, tonight we're squeezing ourselves into a world of lace-up boots, stiff collars, and social rules that make HOA bylaws look rebellious. 1880s. America specifically, what it was actually like to be an everyday woman. Not a Wild West saloon singer, not a plucky heiress with a heart of gold. I mean your average hard-working woman doing her best to survive a day when a labour-saving device meant a butter churn that only broke your spirit half as fast. Before you drift off, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. No judgment if it's 3 AM and you're hiding from your own laundry pile. Now dim those lights, switch on a fan for that soft white noise, and get as comfortable as you possibly can. Put your feet up, unless you want to practice standing for 12 hours straight like you're waiting for the 1885 trolley. As you relax, I want you to imagine, did women in the 1880s ever get to sit down? Or was every chair just ornamental? Was fainting a medical event or just an excuse to escape conversation? Did Victorian hysteria mean you got a spa day or just extra chores? How did women deal with hair that defied the laws of physics? Was deodorant just a whisper of hope, or did everyone agree to sweat in silence? If you had a cold, did you call the doctor, or did you just eat onions and hope for the best? Was polite society anything like real life? Or did it just mean you needed 3 forks and nerves of steel? And let's not forget, what was it really like to wear a corset every single day? Could you run in one, or was brisk walking considered an Olympic event? Was the resting code for collapsing after baking 12 pies? Would you survive the endless rounds of sewing, churning, mending and mothering without Googling how to quit? Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1882. Your hair is already pinned up like a structural engineering project. You're expected to smile through every disaster, and the day hasn't even started. Good luck. The day starts not with a gentle sunrise alarm, but with a cacophony of roosters, clanging pans, and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, someone else will get up first. You pry yourself from a lumpy mattress stuffed with straw, stretch your corseted ribs, and realise you're already late for a day that hasn't officially begun. The air is chilly, no central heating here, just your own body heat, and maybe the accidental warmth from whoever had the privilege of sleeping closest to the kitchen stove last night. Your first sensation is not comfort, but a faint nagging ache in your lower back, courtesy of a mattress that's equal parts livestock filler and hay fever risk. If you're lucky, the night's assortment of aches is the only souvenir from your time spent wedged between siblings, children, or a spouse who somehow always hogs the only real pillow. You squint at the early morning gloom, the faintest pink blush leaking in past the faded curtains. There's a brief moment, just one, where you think, I could close my eyes again. But then the rooster shrieks a second time, like it's auditioning for a horror movie, and the entire house seems to stir to life with the dreadful inevitability of unpaid taxes. Someone is already banging a pot, a child is wailing about cold feet, and a neighbour's cow is bellowing its opinion from next door. There's no time to linger. You swing your legs out of bed, feet landing on a cold wooden floor with a subtle crunch, either a stray oat or something you'll have to add to today's endless list of chores. No fluffy slippers, just the stark reality of the morning chill biting through your nightgown and up your ankles. In 1880s America, the only snooze button is a parent with a stern voice and no patience for just 5 more minutes. Still bleary-eyed, you try to remember the order of the morning. It's always the same, but somehow never routine. Your first job? Rouse everyone else if you weren't the first, which means gentle prods for the younger children, and a more determined nudge for the snoring adult who swears they rested their eyes for a full hour after everyone else went to bed. There's a chain of command here, and the person who actually makes it to the kitchen first gets dibs on the only seat near the stove. It's the Hunger Games, but with aprons. Your hair, pressed flat by sleep and last night's pins, already needs attention. You tuck stray wisps back, knowing they'll rebel again before breakfast is over. Somewhere in the room, someone's already hunting for lost stockings, a missing shoe, or a hair ribbon that mysteriously migrated under the bed during the night. As you shuffle into the main room, you're greeted by the sense of coal dust, stale bread, and whatever passed for clean laundry yesterday. No one is cheerful. Even the sun seems to rise grudgingly, as if it too has heard about what's coming. A day packed with chores, children, unexpected disasters, and maybe, if you're lucky, a chance to sit down. The house is cold, but the routine is oddly comforting. You know exactly what's next, even if you secretly wish for a break in the pattern. Wash up with icy water from the jug, start the fire, prepare breakfast, Make sure the coffee doesn't boil over, and keep one eye on the clock, a clock that is probably just the neighbour's rooster, still screaming outside. You glance at the to-do list already unspooling in your mind. Laundry, mending, errands, school lessons, a visit from the in-laws, and, oh yes, trying to convince the baby to wear both socks. Every task stacks up, every minute accounted for, but somehow you still manage to find little pockets of humour in the absurdity of it all. Maybe it's in the way your oldest tries to negotiate extra chores in exchange for pie, or how the neighbour's goat seems to know the exact moment you finally sit down. And so, the day begins, clattering, noisy, unglamorous, and absolutely relentless. Welcome to morning in 1880s America, where sleep is a luxury, regret is a given, and the rooster always wins. Getting dressed is less about style and more about engineering. You wriggle into your chemise, stockings, drawers, corset, laced by a family member or enemy, petticoats, skirt, blouse, and, if you're lucky, some contraption that promises excellent posture, which just means you can't breathe deeply until autumn. Let's be honest, by the time you've wrangled yourself into just the first 2 layers, you're sweating like someone who's just remembered she left the stove lit all night. The chemise, thin and ever so slightly scratchy, is meant to protect your outer clothing from you, which is the 1880s way of saying, you will not be doing laundry again for a week, so let's try to keep this dress presentable. Over that, you pull on a pair of long, baggy drawers. These aren't delicate, lacy things from a Parisian catalogue. These are practical, often homemade, and have a crotch design best described as optimistically open for business. Convenience, or just an ongoing hazard? You decide. Next comes the corset, which is the main event, a moment in every woman's day that involves physics, advanced negotiation, and occasional prayer. If you're lucky, a gentle sister laces you in. If you're unlucky, it's your little brother, whose definition of snug is whatever makes you turn blue first. Every tug is a reminder that fashion is just short for someone else's bad idea. The laces get pulled tighter, your ribs are firmly reined in, and your lungs are suddenly a premium commodity. Take a deep breath now. You won't get another full one until bedtime. After the corset, there's no time for existential reflection. Petticoats are next. Several, if you want to achieve the proper amount of swish when you walk, or just enough to trip you every time you try to climb stairs. You shimmy one over the other, feeling your range of motion shrink with each new layer. At this point, you're about as flexible as a well-wrapped sandwich. Stockings are yanked on and held in place with garters that threaten mutiny at the worst possible times. You might pin them to your drawers if you're fancy, or just hope for the best. The stockings never quite match. One is always newer, the other carries the ghost of a darning needle and a near miss from a coal stove. Now for the skirt. Getting into one is a full-body endeavour, best accomplished with the support of a chair, a wall, and a tolerant dog. The waistband sits high, higher than your natural waist, higher than your expectations for the day. Buttons, hooks, and hidden fasteners abound, each an opportunity to jab yourself or get stuck halfway. You rotate in place, twisting, pulling, and adjusting, so the back bustle looks like a subtle statement rather than a warning to passing traffic. Your blouse, if it's a weekday, is starched within an inch of its life. The sleeves are puffed, the collar is stiff, and the buttons are inexplicably placed at the back, because why wouldn't they be? If you're lucky, someone helps you button up. If not, you spend 10 minutes flailing, wishing for double-jointed elbows and a more forgiving fashion era. Accessories are next, an apron for work, a belt for style, and maybe a brooch to prove you have a personality outside of stain management. If it's Sunday or a social day, there's a hat to pin and gloves to wrangle, preferably clean, but at this point it's more about the illusion of cleanliness than the reality. Don't forget the hair ribbons, the pins, and the ever-present threat of your bustle collapsing at the most public moment possible. By now, you're encased in a cocoon of cotton, wool, and silent despair. Movement is a cautious affair. Sitting means perching on the very edge of a chair, balancing dignity with circulation. Bending down. Hope you enjoy that swooning feeling and the delighted giggles of any onlookers. You start to understand why fainting is so common in old novels. Sometimes it's just the only way out. And finally, before stepping into the hall, you take one last glance in the cloudy mirror. Cheeks flushed, hair only mildly rebellious, and an expression that says, "I dare you to spill something on me." Getting dressed in 1880s. America is an Olympic event. a test of willpower, flexibility, and breath control. And the real kicker, you'll do it all again tomorrow. Forget private bathrooms. It's either a chilly outhouse, a chamber pot with questionable aim, or if you're fancy, a water closet that gurgles like a haunted well. Toilet paper? Only if you count last year's Sears catalogue. Let's start with the outhouse, that wooden little house out back that always seems farther away in the dark, in the cold, or when you really, really need it. There's no bathroom sprint, there's a trudge, through grass and mud and sometimes snow, your boots thumping against the frozen ground. Once inside, you're greeted by a special kind of draft that seems designed to test your resolve. You're sitting on a splintery seat, staring down into a bottomless pit of your family's collective digestive history, desperately hoping not to drop anything important, like your dignity or this week's only handkerchief. Privacy is a forgotten luxury. Outhouses are rarely insulated, rarely quiet, and never smell like a meadow. If you're lucky, there's a small crescent moon cut in the door to let in some light. If you're unlucky, you share your visit with a spider the size of a silver dollar and the occasional cold gust that makes you question every decision that led to this moment. You keep your skirts gathered, your coat clutched tight, and your prayers brief. On days when the outhouse is out of the question, maybe it's pouring rain, maybe it's midnight, or maybe there's a bear, you fall back on the trusty chamber pot. Trusty might be generous. It's a porcelain bowl that lives under the bed or behind a curtain, always ready and never inviting. Chamber pot logistics are an art form. Aim, pour, empty, and above all, do not forget to empty. Every household has a story of the one time someone did forget, and no one laughs. Chamber pots are not just for emergencies, they're part of the everyday routine, especially for children, the elderly, and anyone too tired to brave the backyard Arctic Circle at 3 a.m. You quickly master the art of using one without waking the rest of the household, a feat worthy of a circus performer, and at least one medal. Morning brings the task of emptying, which is no one's favourite part of the day. The goal: don't spill, don't trip, and don't make eye contact with the neighbours. If you live in a townhouse, and you're very fortunate, or, let's be honest, showing off, you may have access to a water closet. This is basically indoor plumbing's awkward adolescent phase. A wooden seat above a porcelain bowl, a tank of water that may or may not refill, and a flush mechanism that requires equal parts muscle and faith. It gurgles, it wheezes, and occasionally it launches a full-blown rebellion and refuses to cooperate. You try to be grateful, but you still clutch the handle and mutter prayers every time you flush. Hygiene supplies are a whole other saga. In the city, you might have sheets of rough paper, or if you're really lucky, some soft newspaper clippings. More likely you're using cut-up catalogue pages, Sears and Roebuck, their lasting contribution to personal comfort. On the farm, corncobs are rumoured to work just fine, but you suspect that's a lie invented by someone who wanted the last piece of catalogue. Washing hands is a ritual, not a reflex. You find a pitcher, pour cold water into a basin, and scrub with lye soap that leaves your hands smelling like last week's laundry. Hot water is reserved for special occasions and real emergencies. Hand towels are community property, so you just hope you're the first to use it after wash day. Every trip to the bathroom, whether outhouse, chamber pot, or temperamental water closet, is a journey in humility and resilience. There's no locking the door and hiding from the world. Your entire routine is a negotiation with nature, plumbing, and your own patience. In 1880s, America, answering the call of nature is never simple, never private, and always just a little bit colder than you'd like. Welcome to the original bathroom challenge, where your greatest enemy is not the lack of comfort, but the inescapable truth that eventually it's your turn to empty the pot. There's no hot shower to rescue you. It's a basin, a sliver of lye soap, and an argument with the icy water pitcher. Brushing your hair takes longer than most modern commutes. Your first heroic act of the morning, wrestling with the water jug. It's heavy, unwieldy, and always manages to slosh the coldest possible water onto your sleeve, down your dress, or, if it's a particularly unlucky day, straight into your shoe. The basin is metal, which means it has spent all night radiating Arctic energy into its contents. You steel yourself for the first splash. There's no slow acclimatization here. It's instant full-body shock. Congratulations, you're wide awake, and so are your goosebumps. Now it's time for lye soap. There are two types of lye soap. Homemade, with a scent best described as cautiously optimistic goat barn, or store-bought for the wealthy or the forgetful. It's scratchy, stubborn, and leaves your skin with that squeaky, over-cleansed feeling that says, no oil or moisture will survive here. There's no foam, only friction. Rinse, repeat, and try to ignore how the back of your hands are now pink and tingling. If you're lucky, you have a towel that was clean this week. If not, it's a guessing game. Face washing is a discipline in itself. Splash, rinse, repeat. Your complexion is fresh, as in red from cold water and determined scrubbing. You dab on a little rose water if you have it, to counteract the telltale scent of last night's onions or whatever the stove cooked up. Makeup is minimal, a dab of powder, a pinch to the cheeks, maybe a lick of lampblack for the lashes if you're feeling ambitious. The real trick is just looking alert before breakfast. Hair is another saga. Victorian standards demand order, shine, and at least the appearance of patience. You dig out your brush, a sturdy wooden thing with bristles stiffer than the morning wind, and tackle the tangled mess. There is no messy bun. There is no just a hat. There is only detangling section by section, while wincing at every stubborn knot. Long hair, that's a commitment. You braid, you twist, you pin, all while negotiating with gravity and your own sore arms. Short hair? Not an option. Short hair is for rebels, children, and the terminally ill. If you're extra unlucky, you're also delousing. Yes, actually delousing. It's a communal effort, a weekly ritual, and no one talks about it above a whisper. A fine-toothed comb, vinegar rinse, and the hope that your youngest didn't swap bonnets with the neighbour girl. Lice, history's great equaliser. Dental hygiene is basic and brisk. Toothbrushes exist, but toothpaste is likely baking soda mixed with a little salt, or whatever minty concoction the apothecary is selling this month. You brush with dedication and dreams, rinse with cold water, and hope nothing rattles. You glance in the mirror, a tiny cloudy thing with a warped reflection that always manages to make you look a bit more ghostly than you feel. You check your ears, your neck, your hands. Clean enough is the goal. Perfection is for Sundays, and even then, only if you have visitors. Finally, you scrub your hands one more time because the chores haven't started yet and you're already covered in soap and existential dread. Deodorant is wishful thinking, maybe a dusting of talc, a dab of lavender, or simply a very positive attitude. Perfume, for those who can afford it, is applied with a heavy hand and hope. For everyone else, there's just a silent agreement. We're all in this together. By the time you finish, the water in the basin is a testament to your struggle, a cloudy soup of soap residue and hard-earned effort. You dry off, smooth your hair, pinch your cheeks for colour, and step into the next room, where breakfast and a dozen more battles await. In 1880s, America, morning hygiene is less about luxury and more about small victories, icy water, and the stubborn refusal to surrender to another day's mess. Breakfast is a tactical operation. You're up before dawn, boiling coffee, baking biscuits, flipping bacon, and shooing children out the door. You eat standing up, sitting is for people with no chores left. The clock hasn't struck 6, but the kitchen is already alive with a chaos that feels like a barnyard on parade. There's the hiss of coffee percolating over the stove, a hopeful but futile attempt to summon energy from scorched beans and wishful thinking. You're not sipping, you're gulping it as medicine, half hot, half bitter, and all necessary. The warmth is a small mercy, washing away the chill from your fingers as you shuffle from stove to table to wash basin and back again. Biscuits must be rolled, cut, and slid into the oven before anyone gets ideas about starting the day hungry. The flour is everywhere, on your apron, in your hair, dusting the floor like the aftermath of a tiny snowstorm. The dough, sticky and stubborn, never quite behaves as the recipe claims it should. Recipes, after all, are vague. A good handful of flour, a little soda, enough milk to make it right. You become part chemist, part magician, adding a pinch more of this or that, hoping for biscuits that rise instead of sulk. There's bacon in the pan, crackling and spitting like a chorus of tiny firecrackers. If you're lucky, there's enough for everyone to have more than just a sniff. Eggs are gathered fresh, still warm from the henhouse, if the children made their rounds in time. Sometimes the eggs are clean, sometimes you have to chase a chicken around the yard at dawn, muttering apologies to nobody in particular. You flip, stir, and time everything so precisely that if the Navy ever wants a breakfast drill instructor, you're available. Children drift in. sleepy-eyed and already squabbling about who gets the end piece of bacon. You hand out plates, referee the ongoing battle for the biggest biscuit, and keep one ear tuned to the thudding of boots on the porch. Another child, another mouth to feed, another errand to bark out before they vanish into the morning. Meanwhile, a mountain of the other work awaits. The laundry must be started, the firewood stacked, and someone has to sweep out the ashes from yesterday. You shout reminders as the children escape into the yard. Don't forget your lunch, watch out for snakes, and for heaven's sake, keep your socks on this time. In the background, the house is already waking up, clanging pans, squeaky doors, and that familiar low-level hum of impending disaster if you don't keep things moving. Breakfast itself is almost an afterthought. You snatch bites between tasks, eating with one hand while the other stirs, flips, or wipes a child's face. There's no sitting down. Chairs are reserved for guests or people whose job is finished, which, let's be honest, is no one in this house. You eat over the counter, near the stove, or hovering above the table, eyes always scanning for the next crisis. Someone spills milk. Someone else claims they saw a mouse. A child quietly pockets a biscuit for later, and you pretend not to notice. By the time the sun is fully up, breakfast has already been served, eaten, and cleared away. At least, cleared enough that the next task can begin. Plates are stacked, crumbs swept into a waiting palm, and coffee mugs returned to the stove for one last refill before it's time to move outside. The only evidence that a meal even happened is the faint aroma of bacon, a crust of bread, and the lingering heat of the oven. And so, with breakfast behind you, the 5 a.m. workday truly begins. Animals to feed, fires to stoke, a garden to weed, and 1,000 tiny emergencies to juggle before anyone else in town has even tied their shoes. In the 1880s, breakfast isn't just the most important meal of the day, it's the first test of your stamina, your patience, and your ability to wrangle chaos into something that at least resembles order. And you pass, every single morning, whether you get to sit down or not. Every movement is a negotiation with your own ribcage. Want to bend down? Hope you enjoy dramatic swooning. Need to run? Not today. Breathing? Optional. Corset management isn't something you learn overnight. It's a lifelong education in strategic discomfort. You start young, usually when a helpful aunt, mother, or fashion-forward grandmother decides you're old enough to stand up straight. This means standing still while someone laces you in like a roast being prepped for Sunday dinner. The trick you soon discover is to inhale at just the right moment. Inhale too soon, and you're doomed to spend the day hunched like a wilted flower. Wait too long and you might black out before breakfast. Timing, as they say, is everything. With your corset secured, every part of your day becomes a lesson in creative adaptation. Sitting down is a dignified affair, not a flop or a sprawl. You perch at the edge of a chair, careful not to tip backward or let the stays of your corset jab into the tender parts of your back. Posture, thankfully, is handled for you by the engineering marvel that is whalebone, steel, or, if you're lucky, a bit of flexible cording. You do not slouch. You could not slouch if you tried. The greatest test arrives whenever you have to pick something up. The floor, for example, is now a distant dream. If you must retrieve a dropped spoon, you perfect the graceful crouch, a maneuver that involves bending your knees while keeping your back rigid, all the while pretending you meant to examine the floorboards for dust. The less graceful alternative is the side lean, best performed when no one is watching, and only if you don't mind risking a wardrobe malfunction. And running? No one runs in a corset. If you absolutely must move quickly, perhaps to rescue a child from impending disaster, or catch the bread before it burns, you develop a dignified speed walk, mincing along like a determined duck. Your steps are short, your torso upright, and your breathing shallow, because the only thing more embarrassing than tripping in your corset is fainting in it. Speaking of fainting, the threat hovers over every day. The tighter the laces, the more you flirt with the infamous Victorian swoon. It's not always as dramatic as the novels suggest. Sometimes it's just a slow sinking feeling, a wave of lightheadedness, and the sudden desire to sit down immediately, no matter where you are or who's watching. Swooning is both a warning sign and a social tactic. If you time it right, you can escape an unpleasant chore or an awkward conversation with a strategically placed sigh. Eating in a corset is an exercise in restraint. Large meals are a relic of your pre-corset days. Breakfast is manageable, but by lunch you realize that full is now a relative term. Every bite is carefully considered. Save room for dessert becomes save room for breathing. Those who overindulge risk an afternoon spent fighting off hiccups and wishing for a looser bodice. At the end of a long day, when you're finally free to untie the laces, the relief is so intense it feels like floating. Your spine lengthens by an inch, your ribs expand, and you suddenly rediscover lung capacity. You take a deep, glorious breath and vow never to complain about elastic waistbands again. You might even swear off corsets for good until tomorrow, when fashion, society, and your mother's watchful eye convince you otherwise. Yet for all their discomforts, corsets also carry a certain pride. They're beautifully made, stitched, and boned to last. A well-fitting corset supports your back, lifts your posture, and shapes you according to the day's ideals of beauty. There's camaraderie in sharing corset woes with your friends, a secret society of women who have all mastered the art of breathing shallow, moving gracefully, and surviving with dignity, style, and just a pinch of sarcasm. In the end, the corset is more than a garment. It's an attitude, a challenge, a badge of historical perseverance. In 1880s, America, you don't just wear your corset, you live with it, negotiate with it, and occasionally curse it under your breath as you attempt to bend down just one more time. Laundry means dragging tubs, boiling water, lye soap, and a wringer that's mostly designed to pinch your fingers. You'll be scrubbing, rinsing, and hanging sheets high enough to signal passing ships. Let's get one thing straight. If you ever fantasized about the good old days because you pictured sunlit clotheslines and gingham dresses flapping gently in the breeze, allow 1880s Laundry Day to shatter that illusion. It starts at dawn because you need every available hour of sunlight, and probably a few extra hours borrowed from your sanity. You haul water from the well, one heavy bucket at a time, and by the third trip your arms are already reconsidering their relationship with your body. There's no gentle faucet or warm shower, just the sound of water sloshing in a tin pail and the knowledge that you'll spill half of it before you reach the washtub. Next, you get the fire going. Laundry without hot water is a form of torture banned by the Geneva Convention, probably. You fill an enormous pot and set it to boil, watching the steam billow out and fog up the kitchen windows. You hope the pot doesn't scorch, but you know it probably will, and now you're also on the hook for scrubbing that later. As the water heats, you shred slivers of lye soap into the tub, hoping that last week's batch will last through at least the first round of socks. The real work begins with the washboard, a tool whose only goal seems to be toughening your knuckles and reminding you what raw skin feels like. You scrub each shirt, dress, and pair of long johns until you see the true colour of the fabric, and sometimes wish you hadn't. No matter how many times you rinse, there's always one stubborn grass stain left, usually on the knees of the family's most energetic child. Blame is assigned, promises are made, but you know you'll be back here next week cursing the same patch of ground. After the scrubbing comes the wringer, a heavy cast iron contraption with 2 rollers that will gleefully eat any loose button, scarf, or fingertip foolish enough to get too close. You crank the handle, feeling your shoulders protest with every revolution, and feed each item through. If you pause too long, the handle jams or reverses, threatening to send a sock flying across the yard. The wringer doesn't care. It's here for pain and moisture extraction, in that order. Once the clothes are wrung out, you haul sopping, steaming piles of laundry out into the yard. The clothesline stretches from tree to tree, always just a bit too high for comfort. You reach up, on tiptoe, if you're short, or with a stool balanced precariously on uneven ground if you're shorter still. You pin up each sheet, towel, and pair of bloomers, hoping the sun cooperates, and the wind doesn't carry half your wardrobe into the neighbour's pig pen. Somewhere along the line, a sparrow decides your best pillowcase looks like prime nesting material, and you try to shoo it away with hands that now smell faintly of smoke and despair. Laundry isn't just clothes. It's linens, aprons, tablecloths, and anything else that couldn't escape the week's messes. The entire yard transforms into a waving, dripping tribute to your efforts, a semaphore of surrender to the gods of cleanliness. While everything dries, you're not off the hook. You dump out grimy water, scrub the tub, and set everything to air out before mildew takes hold. If it rains, you make a mad dash to rescue whatever you can, muttering the kinds of words not found in any etiquette manual. By evening, everything is mostly dry and mostly clean. You fold, mend, and stack, your arms tingling and your back promising revenge. You inspect your hands, raw, red, and covered in proof of a day's labour. It's a special kind of tired, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you long for a future with spin cycles and fabric softener. So next time you toss a load into your machine, spare a grateful thought for the women of the 1880s who faced laundry day with nothing but muscle, soap, and the kind of stubborn optimism that could get grass stains out of anything except, perhaps, your own memory. Children are everywhere, climbing, screaming, and inventing new ways to break their own limbs. Your referee, nurse, chef, and amateur snake handler all before noon. If you've ever wrangled a toddler in a grocery store, multiply that by 5, give it a backyard full of hazards, and set it loose with 1880s technology. That's your day. The moment breakfast plates are cleared, the young ones are off, tumbling downstairs, leaping off porch railings, and chasing the neighbours' chickens like it's an Olympic event. Shoes are optional, mud is mandatory, and the family dog has already given up on pretending to supervise. There are no safety gates, no outlet covers, and definitely no screen time to slow the chaos. The older children are helping, which means they're giving orders to the smaller ones, inventing chores, and starting arguments about whose turn it is to bring in the firewood. Meanwhile, the baby is on a determined crawl straight for the nearest danger. The stove, the well, or the one sharp thing that you swore you put out of reach. Your morning soundtrack is equal parts laughter, squabbling, and the thud-thud cry pattern you learn to interpret by volume and urgency. Sometimes you hear a suspicious silence, never a good sign. It's either the moment before a major discovery, look, I caught a snake, or a minor disaster, the goat's in the kitchen again. You respond like a pro, calm, quick, with a rag in one hand and the patience of a saint in the other. Between disputes, you patch up skinned knees, rebandage old scrapes, and produce snacks with the efficiency of a short-order cook. Apples, bread, leftover bacon. If it's edible, it's fair game. Lunch is prepared on the fly, eaten in shifts, with at least one child always demanding something better, as if you're secretly hoarding chocolate cake behind the flour bin. Education is woven into the chaos. There's a slate and a stub of chalk for practicing letters, but it's hard to enforce reading lessons when there's a perfectly good mud puddle outside. If you're strict, you'll manage an hour or two of arithmetic before the youngest tries to help by drawing cows across the multiplication tables. History and geography are taught via kitchen table storytelling, and science class is a hands-on lesson involving worms, rainwater, and an earnest discussion about why you shouldn't eat anything found under the porch. Afternoons don't bring peace, only a new kind of pandemonium. The littlest need naps, but refuse to admit it, while the older ones invent new games that threaten to destroy your laundry line or trample the vegetable patch. There's an argument about who gets to use the good jump rope, which is, of course, just a length of twine you rescued from the chicken coop. Sibling alliances shift by the hour, and as the sun climbs higher, so does the pitch of their voices. You're also the social coordinator, arranging playdates with neighbour children, which inevitably leads to twice the mess and thrice the noise. Every scraped elbow is another chance to apply the world's slowest, most suspicious homemade remedies, and every tear is met with a combination of sympathy and sternness. You threaten to separate them, but everyone knows you'll cave if it buys you 5 minutes of quiet. By supper, you've mediated a dozen arguments, rescued 3 toys from the well, and swept up at least one pile of mysterious crumbs. Baths are met with protest, bedtime stories are negotiated with the skill of future lawyers, and the last child always claims to be hungry as soon as the lights go out. When quiet finally arrives, you sink into your chair, grateful, exhausted, and slightly amazed that everyone survived another day. In 1880s, America, raising children is a full-contact sport with no half-time, no trophy, and no instruction manual, just a bottomless well of patience, humour, and the understanding that herding cats really was an understatement. With no fridge, you're on a first-name basis with pickling jars, root cellars, and the fear that your only jar of strawberry jam will develop character before winter is over. Food preservation in the 1880s isn't a charming Pinterest project. It's a daily game of survival and a test of nerves. Every meal you enjoy in December depends on the back-breaking labour you do in July, when the sun is hot and the tomatoes are threatening to take over the entire garden. You pick, you wash, you slice, and you hope. Because if you mess this up, it's not just a bad batch of jam, it's 6 months of monotonous, spirit-crushing boiled potatoes. First, there's canning, the grand summer ritual. You haul baskets of fruit and vegetables to the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, sweat on your brow. The stove blazes away, heating enormous pots of water that will fog every window in the house. Mason jars are sterilised with near-religious fervour. One lapse, and you'll be greeted with a science experiment in October. The sound of a sealing jar lid pinging is the music of security. Every time it doesn't seal, you hear the subtle whisper of famine. As you pour boiling jam into the jars and screw the lids on tight, you wonder if you've remembered the right amount of sugar or if you're secretly bottling up a dozen jars of future disappointment. Pickling is a fine art, somewhere between chemistry and witchcraft. Cucumbers, beans, onions, if it grows, it gets pickled. You boil vinegar, add spices, pour everything over your harvest, and store the jars in the darkest corner of the cellar. The whole house smells like a cross between a deli and a cleaning supply closet, and everyone's eyes water for hours. The next day you worry. Did you put in enough salt? Too much? Will you accidentally create a culinary landmine that blows up at Christmas dinner, or will you simply have the crunchiest pickles in the county? Salting is a necessity for meat. When the family pig meets its fate, the real work begins. Slabs of pork are rubbed down with handfuls of salt packed into barrels and stored in the coolest place you can find. The salt draws out moisture, preserves the meat, and ensures that when you bite into breakfast bacon in February, you won't regret your choices. Of course, you're never entirely sure. Did you pack the barrel tight enough? Is that mold, or just extra flavour? You prod, poke, and sniff with the anxiety of someone who's seen one too many hams go bad at the worst possible time. Everything not canned, pickled, or salted ends up in the root cellar, a cool, dark, slightly sinister underworld beneath the house. It's lined with shelves of glass jars, bins of potatoes and carrots, baskets of apples, and mysterious things wrapped in burlap. The air smells of earth and possibility. You check your stash often. One rotten apple, and suddenly everything is in danger. You rotate, rearrange, and occasionally launch a preemptive strike by turning a soft potato into soup before it infects the rest. Preserving food means always thinking 2 seasons ahead. In summer, you're sweating over boiling pots. In fall, you're wrapping apples in newspaper and praying the cellar stays cold. Winter is a long, anxious stretch of opening jars, sniffing, and holding each meal up to the light like a jeweller inspecting a diamond. Sometimes something goes wrong. A jar pops its seal, a pickled beet fizzles with mysterious bubbles, or the salted beef is off in a way you try not to describe out loud. You adjust, substitute, and, if you're clever, add extra spices to mask the evidence. There's always the underlying fear that what you put up won't last. The jam will grow mould, the pickles will go limp, the meat will turn. Every successful meal is a small victory, proof that you've managed to outsmart the elements for another week. In the end, food preservation, in 1880s, America is about hope, hard work, and a little bit of desperation. You savour every crisp pickle, sweet spoonful of jam, and salty bite of bacon, because each one is proof that despite the odds, you're keeping winter at bay, one jar at a time. You sweep, mop, dust, and then sweep again. The only thing spreading faster than dust is advice from older relatives. In the 1880s, housework is less a chore and more an unending loop, like starring in your own personal, never-ending folk tale where the villain is dust and your only weapon is sheer stubbornness. The first rule of housekeeping: you will never ever win. Dust is eternal. It blows in under doors, sneaks through cracked window frames, and settles on every available surface with the relentless enthusiasm of an unpaid intern. You could sweep every hour, and by the next it's as if you'd never tried at all. The day's battle begins after breakfast. You grab your broom, a formidable thing made from bundled twigs or, if you're lucky, store-bought bristles that haven't yet surrendered to the rigours of the parlour rug. Sweeping is not just for floors, it's for corners, baseboards, and that weird spot behind the stove where all crumbs migrate, never to be seen again. Dust bunnies grow large enough to develop personalities, and cobwebs appear in the blink of an eye, spun by spiders who clearly hold tenure. Once the floors are at least navigable, you fetch the mop and a bucket of soapy water. No scented solutions here. It's lye soap again, harsh on hands, rough on floors, and guaranteed to strip paint from anything it touches. Mopping is both an upper body workout and a test of patience. You attack sticky spots left by last night's stew, hoping you don't find anything alive. If you do, it's handled with the same resolve as everything else: swift, discreet, and with a promise never to mention it to anyone outside the family. After the mop comes dusting. Feather dusters are for fancy people in magazine engravings. In your world, it's a slightly damp cloth, a keen eye, and a silent prayer that nobody will run a gloved finger along the mantel. The parlour gets special attention, especially if there's any chance a neighbour might drop in unannounced for just a minute. Translation: a full hour of judgment and passive-aggressive compliments. You polish, arrange, and fluff, and by the time you're done, the sun has shifted, illuminating new smudges you swear weren't there this morning. Advice is constant and comes from every direction, mainly older relatives who claim their floors never collected dust, or that a little vinegar and elbow grease can cure anything, including heartbreak. You listen politely as you wring out another rag, mentally noting that their houses always seemed suspiciously clean because they had daughters-in-law, and an army of grandchildren at their disposal. Every day has a rotating menu of chores: beds to make, windows to wash, fires to stoke, and chamber pots to empty. Again, there's never an end to that part. You scrub stains from tablecloths, patch holes in children's stockings, and chase wayward chickens out of the kitchen when nobody's looking. There are rugs to beat, taken outside and whacked with all the force you can muster, sending clouds of dust skyward and giving the neighbours something to gossip about. Even with the endless effort, there's always something undone. A trail of muddy footprints across the newly washed floor, soot settling back on the sills, a stray thread unravelling from the hem you just mended. You sigh, pick up your tools, and keep going. Because if there's one thing 1880s housework teaches you, it's resilience. You develop an eye for what really matters: a tidy parlour for guests, a swept hearth for warmth, and just enough order to make the chaos manageable. By sundown you're exhausted, hands raw and back aching. Yet, as the lamplight glows and the house finally quiets, you take a certain pride in the small shining victories: a floor clean enough to walk barefoot, a table set for supper, and the knowledge that tomorrow dust will return but so will you, broom in hand, ready for round two. In this game, you don't win, but you never stop playing. And maybe that's the secret to keeping a home, and your sense of humour, alive, even as the dust settles right back where it started. Groceries aren't delivered. You hike to the store, balance a week's worth of supplies, and barter with someone who definitely does not like your hat. If you think of grocery shopping as a leisurely stroll down air-conditioned aisles, pushing a cart to soft music and deciding between 5 brands of almond milk, 1880s, America would like a word. There's no car in the driveway, no handy basket. Your shopping trip begins with lacing up boots, bracing yourself for the weather, and calculating exactly how many eggs you can carry, without dropping any or traumatizing the local chickens. First, you take stock of your list, usually kept in your head, because scrap paper is too precious to waste. You mentally run through the pantry and cellar: flour, sugar, lamp oil, a precious square of chocolate if you're feeling fancy, and soap, because you will always need more soap. As for perishables, the rule is simple: buy only what you can carry, and if you can't carry it, you learn to do without. Shopping light isn't a lifestyle choice, it's a survival strategy. The journey to the general store is rarely brief or uneventful. It's often a mile or more, over muddy roads, through patches of woods, and sometimes across a field that will definitely try to steal your shoes. The weather in classic 1880s fashion is never on your side. Summer brings dust, winter brings frostbite, and spring or fall are just varieties of mud. You carry a basket, a woven sack, and sometimes a child or two who insists on tagging along until the second the mud deepens. Arriving at the general store is an event in itself. The bell over the door jingles and every head swivels to see who's arrived. The storekeeper sizes you up, judging whether you're here to buy or just to gossip. Hint, it's always both. Shelves line the walls, crowded with barrels, crates, and mysterious tins covered in faded labels. There's flour by the sack, beans by the scoop, licorice twists in a glass jar that looks older than the state of Nebraska, and, if you're lucky, 1 or 2 bruised apples tucked behind the onions. Bartering is as important as money. You hand over eggs, maybe a pat of butter, or last week's batch of hand-sewn dishcloths in exchange for sugar or tea. If you're short on funds, you might offer to pay on account, which means the storekeeper writes your name in the great ledger of debts and hopes you're more reliable than the Smiths down the road. Prices aren't marked. Everything is negotiated, usually with the kind of sharp wit reserved for card games and family disputes. You don't just shop, you gather news, swap recipes, and endure opinions about everything from weather to wardrobe. Today, Mrs. Johnson is convinced your bonnet is too large for respectable company, but her pies are legendary, so you smile, nod, and compliment her crust. The store is the community's rumour mill, so you also hear about who's got the croup, who's courting whom, and what the preacher's wife really thinks about Saturday dances. Packing up your goods is an exercise in spatial reasoning, heavy on the bottom, fragile on top, and everything else squished wherever it fits. If you brought children, you now realise this was a tactical error. Someone always knocks over the syrup or samples the licorice when no one's looking. The walk home is harder, laden with flour sacks, candles, and the regret of not buying that extra spool of thread. And just when you think you're done, you remember the other quests. The butcher, the blacksmith, the post office, all scattered across town or, if you're unlucky, several towns. Errands multiply faster than you can cross them off. By the time you trudge back up the lane, arms aching, shoes muddy, and patience wearing thin, you feel less like a shopper and more like a pioneer returning from an expedition. The best part? You get to do it all again next week, hat judges and all. In the 1880s, grocery shopping isn't just about food. It's a test of endurance, a measure of social agility, and an ongoing adventure that never fails to humble. And every time you look at a well-stocked pantry, you remember exactly what it took to get it there. One step, one trade, and one judgmental glance at a time. Socializing requires 3 wardrobe changes, scripted conversation, and the stamina to hold a teacup without shaking. Gossip is the real sport. If you think stopping by means popping over in sweatpants and saying hello, welcome to the 1880s, where a simple visit to your neighbour's parlour is a full-scale production. First, there's the wardrobe issue. Your morning house dress will not suffice. For company, you need your best day dress, preferably something with extra frills and 0 visible stains. You battle with a fresh set of petticoats, wrangle your hair into something resembling a style, and pin on a brooch for good measure. If you're truly ambitious, you might even switch out your apron, lest anyone assume you're not entirely on top of your domestic game. Before leaving, you take inventory of conversation topics. You must avoid politics, religion, and, ironically, most topics that anyone actually wants to discuss. Acceptable subjects include the weather, local gardening triumphs or disasters, and the scandalous rumour that Mrs. Davenport's goose has gone missing. You rehearse polite greetings and responses in your head, because one misstep and you'll be the star of next week's tea. Making your way to a neighbour's house is its own ordeal. You brush the dust from your shoes, straighten your hat, and practice the correct posture for ringing a bell without looking desperate or cold. At the door, you present your calling card, your personal social passport, embossed with your name in delicate script. The quality of your card and the crispness of your handshake are apparently direct indicators of your moral standing. Once ushered into the parlour, the real work begins. Parlours are rarely comfortable. They are shrines to the idea of company, kept at a temperature that is either too cold or just on the edge of suffocating, depending on the season. You're perched on the edge of an embroidered chair, surrounded by ornamental pillows that you're not supposed to lean against, and greeted by a hostess whose smile may or may not be genuine. Your teacup is delicate, your saucer is wobbly, and your mission is to not drop either while fielding a barrage of polite questions. Conversation is a tightly choreographed dance, with all the excitement of walking a social tightrope and none of the safety nets. You nod in the right places, murmur your agreement, and occasionally slip in a carefully curated anecdote about your children's latest antics or your victory over last week's batch of jam. You must never sound boastful, but must also never admit defeat. Admitting you have dust in your parlour or that your pie crust is less than flawless. Scandalous. Meanwhile, the real action bubbles beneath the surface. Gossip. The ladies of the parlour are experts in the art of hint and implication. Did you notice Mrs. Pritchard's new curtains? Have you heard about Mr. Edwards's late nights at the post office? Gossip flows smoother than the tea, passed with subtle nods and raised eyebrows. Every tidbit is carefully packaged, every rumour sprinkled with just enough ambiguity to keep things interesting. You never admit to spreading gossip, but somehow everyone leaves with more information than they arrived with. The children, if present, are expected to sit quietly and look presentable, which means they are either unusually angelic or one cookie away from catastrophe. You keep one eye on them and another on your teacup, ready to intercept disaster at a moment's notice. All the while, the clock ticks on, each minute stretching longer as you mentally catalogue the chores piling up back home. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, you rise. Thank your hostess with impeccable manners and retrieve your calling card from the silver tray on your way out. You walk home, replaying every word and worrying you may have misstepped, only to receive a new invitation the following week, because in the 1880s social calls are both endurance sport and community glue. You return home, exhausted but victorious, with new stories, more gossip, and the distinct satisfaction of having survived another round of the Olympics of etiquette. You swap your company dress for your work apron, ready to share only the best bits with your family, because in 1880s, America, the parlour is where reputations are made, alliances are forged, and gossip reigns as queen. If you get sick, your options are home remedies, mustard plasters anyone, the town doctor with a black bag of mysteries, or just waiting it out with a quilt and a prayer. Let's start with the first line of defence, home remedies, that ancient and slightly terrifying arsenal passed down by mothers, aunts and grandmothers since the dawn of time. Have a cough? Try onion syrup, which is exactly as appealing as it sounds. Headache? Lavender compress. If you're lucky, if you're not, it's vinegar-soaked rags and the enthusiastic application of hope. For fever, there's willow bark tea, a cup of something greenish, or, if all else fails, simply being wrapped up in every available quilt and left to sweat it out. Someone will bring broth, someone else will mutter a blessing, and everyone will agree you look a bit peaked, which is 1880s code for don't get your hopes up. Should your condition worsen, if you're still coughing after 3 days, or heaven forbid you start talking nonsense, the next step is calling the town doctor. His arrival is announced by the sound of horse hooves and the faint clatter of glass bottles in his satchel. The doctor is part magician, part gambler, and part very tired man who has seen everything. He carries a bag packed with tinctures, powders, odd-smelling salves, and an absolutely unreasonable amount of confidence. Inside are the miracles of the era, laudanum for pain, because nothing says medical progress like tincture of opium, calomel for fevers, with a side effect of mercury poisoning, and maybe a bottle of castor oil, for reasons that are never adequately explained. The doctor listens to your lungs, checks your pulse, and declares a diagnosis with the solemnity of a judge and the flair of a showman. A touch of the ague, he might say, or female hysteria if you so much as mention feeling tired. Treatments are creative, if not always effective. You might be bled, cupped, purged, or dosed with a syrup that would be illegal in at least 40 countries today. You thank him anyway, because what else can you do? The town's entire supply of medical advice fits in one small bag, and the only second opinion is your neighbour who swears by chewing birch bark and humming hymns. Sometimes, of course, you simply wait it out. There's a deep faith in quilts, rest, and the human body's ability to mend itself. If not, well, you'll have the best-looking corpse in town thanks to all that rosewater and lavender. Taking to bed is the phrase used when you're too ill to carry on. You're fussed over, fed thin soup, and given plenty of time to reflect on all your life choices. Neighbours stop by with casseroles and fresh gossip, and someone is always on hand to dab your brow or update you on the state of the laundry. Childbirth, injuries, and any real emergencies are handled with a sort of stoic courage that makes you wonder if everyone in the 1880s is secretly made of iron. Babies arrive at home, ushered in by a midwife and a prayer, and you hope for an easy birth and a quick recovery. Broken bones are set with makeshift splints and a lot of gritted teeth, and if you need stitches, you better hope the doctor's hand is steady and his needle is clean. And then there's laudanum, the panacea and curse of the era. 1 drop for a headache, 2 for sleeplessness, a spoonful for nerves. It's prescribed for everything from coughs to heartbreak, and its effects are a mixed blessing. You might sleep through the pain, but you also risk drifting into a laudanum haze and missing half the family gossip. In 1880s, America, getting sick is an adventure in patience, trust and creative thinking. You try every remedy, listen to the doctor, and ultimately put your faith in the body's stubborn will to survive. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you're left with a cautionary tale and a new respect for modern medicine. Either way, you end the ordeal grateful for a strong constitution, a bottomless supply of quilts, and the unwavering hope that next time it'll just be a cold. From castor oil to electric belts, the medicine cabinet is a graveyard of questionable cures and flavourless tonics. You become a reluctant connoisseur of all things restorative. The 1880s medicine cabinet isn't really a cabinet, it's a wooden box or a cluttered shelf, somewhere dark and cool, filled with mysterious bottles and tins, half of which are labelled with handwriting you can't quite trust. Some of these cures are passed down from Grandma, who claims they worked wonders for her lumbago. Others are impulse purchases from the travelling patent medicine wagon, lured in by bold promises and a pitchman who could sell snake oil to an actual snake. Let's start with castor oil, the universal cure-all, or at least the universal threat. Got a stomachache? Castor oil. Can't sleep? Castor oil. Stubbed your toe? Lost your cow? Feeling blue? You guessed it. Castor oil. Its flavour is legendary, its results unpredictable. Just the sight of the bottle is enough to send children scurrying, and even the bravest adults wince as the oily dose slides down. Beside it stands a lineup of little brown bottles, each claiming to fix what ails you. Cod liver oil, for vitality, but mostly for the taste of fish and regret. Paregoric, tincture of opium for coughs or cranky babies, and camphorated oil, which smells like it could cure the plague but mostly just makes your skin tingle. There's a jar of menthol crystals for chest rubs and inhalations, and a blue glass vial of soothing syrup, essentially morphine, which explains why the baby stopped fussing, and why everyone's a little nervous about how much to use. For aches and pains, there are liniments, fiery and pungent, that promise to draw out rheumatism but mostly draw out your ability to smell anything else for a week. Plasters, thick, sticky pads, are slapped on sore backs or chests, heating the skin until you're not sure if you're better or just distracted. And for serious colds, there's always mustard plaster, a combination of mustard and hope, guaranteed to burn away your symptoms and perhaps the first few layers of your skin. No cabinet would be complete without a sampling of tonics. These are universally bitter, universally restorative, and universally suspect. They contain everything from sarsaparilla and gentian root to alcohol, and a secret blend of herbs. Some taste like despair, some like sugar, and all promise that if you finish the bottle, you'll be twice as healthy and half as cranky. There's even Vin Mariani, wine with cocaine, which is the secret behind so many energetic testimonials in the back of Harper's Weekly. And then, of course, come the gadgets. Glass cups for cupping, scarificators for bloodletting, and if you have a neighbour who's really on the cutting edge, maybe an electric belt or magnetised corset, meant to stimulate the nerves and invigorate the circulation. Does it work? No one can say, but it gives you a lovely tingling feeling and an excuse to sit down. Many a night is spent rummaging through this cabinet, searching for something to soothe a cough, ease a headache, or cure a stubborn bout of melancholia. You measure out drops and spoonfuls, mix up poultices, and quietly hope this time it's the miracle cure and not another flavour of disappointment. The line between medicine and misery is thin. Too much laudanum, and you'll sleep for days. Too little, and you'll be up all night with the croup. You learn to trust your instincts and your neighbour's advice, sometimes more than the doctor's. Every new elixir is greeted with scepticism and a prayer that it doesn't make things worse. In 1880s, America, your medicine cabinet is a lesson in optimism and caution, a daily reminder that staying healthy is as much about luck as it is about liniment. You become an accidental expert in flavourless tonics and bold promises, always searching for something that actually works and suspecting deep down that what you really need is a nap, a cup of tea, and the hope that tomorrow's cure will taste a little less like despair. Church is a social test. Hats are mandatory, singing is enthusiastic, and everyone knows if you nodded off during the sermon. It all begins at dawn, earlier if you have children, livestock, or an outfit that needs urgent mending. Church attire is not a casual affair. Out comes your best dress, pressed and brushed, the one you hope is still mostly in fashion. Petticoats are layered for volume, collars are starched into submission. The centrepiece is the hat, wide-brimmed or pillbox, adorned with whatever feathers, ribbons, or, if you're feeling bold, entire artificial birds your budget and imagination can support. You pin it to your hair, with all the hope and engineering skill of someone prepping for a gale. Breakfast is hurried and subdued. There's no bacon crackling or boisterous laughter, only a quiet chorus of reminders. Don't get dirty, mind your boots, brush your hair one more time, as everyone files through the house like a flock of anxious, overdressed chickens. You wrangle your brood, bribe the youngest with a sticky sweet, and shepherd the entire family out the door. Shoes are shined, gloves are donned, and even the most rebellious child knows better than to question the gravity of Sunday morning. The walk to church is a parade of politeness and subtle one-upmanship. You exchange nods with neighbours, discreetly scan their outfits for signs of fraying hems or last-minute repairs, and remind the children, again, to keep their hands out of the mud. The church bell rings in the distance, a call to arms and a threat rolled into one. Arriving late is not an option. The pews up front fill quickly, and the back rows are reserved for the chronically tardy and the locally infamous. Inside, the air is heavy with perfume, polished wood, and a faint whiff of damp wool. You slide into your pew, careful not to wrinkle your dress or crush your hat, and cast a sidelong glance at the competition. The service begins with a hymn. Everyone sings, some in tune or with enthusiasm. The organ wheezes along, filling the sanctuary with sound and giving your heart just enough of a lift to forget, briefly, that you have 3 hours of sitting still ahead. The sermon is both a spiritual journey and an endurance contest. The minister drones on, voice rising and falling with the cadence of experience and the certainty that he will not be interrupted. Children fidget, parents glare, and every so often a soft snore floats up from the back, swiftly followed by a sharp elbow or a muffled cough. You try to stay awake by studying the stained glass, counting the ceiling beams and reciting the list of chores waiting at home. There's always one dramatic moment, a warning about the perils of pride, or a story about the dangers of sloth, that is met with a round of pious nodding and at least one sideways glance at a neighbour. Socialising is the real marathon. After the service, you file out in orderly chaos, stopping on the church steps for a flurry of handshakes, cheek kisses and whispered asides. Gossip travels at the speed of light. By the time you reach the gate, you know who's engaged, who's ill, and who is seen buying extra sugar at the general store. Children dart through the crowd, testing the limits of their patience and your nerves. You maintain a polite smile and mentally tally the number of social calls you now owe as a result of these conversations. Lunch, if you're lucky, is a picnic on the church lawn, potato salad, ham, and the inevitable pie contest. You pray the ants behave, your pie crust holds, and the children don't start a wrestling match in their Sunday best. By the time you head home, your hat is askew, your gloves are missing, and your patience is in tatters. Church on Sunday is not just about faith, it's a public performance, a test of stamina, style, and social savvy. As you finally slip off your hat and sink into a chair, you realise you've survived another marathon in lace, at least until next week when the cycle begins again. Styling your hair means braiding, curling, and pinning until your arms go numb. Humidity is the enemy. If all else fails, you claim you were inspired by Paris. Hair care in the 1880s is an all-consuming art form, a feat of physics, engineering, and pure stubborn will. It's the daily challenge that greets you every morning, long before the first cup of coffee and long after you've resolved to just keep it simple today. The rules are clear. Hair must be neat, hair must be contained, and hair must, above all else, defy gravity in ways that would make a modern hairstylist weep. Step 1. Brush and brush again. Out comes your boar bristle brush, the 19th century equivalent of a medieval torture device, and you work through knots, tangles, and the occasional straw from yesterday's laundry day. There's no detangling spray, only oil and determination. You brush until your scalp tingles and your arm aches, and still there are flyaways, those rebellious little wisps that refuse to cooperate no matter how much water, spit, or wishful thinking you apply. Braiding is an essential skill, as crucial as bread making or mending socks. Simple braids for chores, elaborate plaits and coils for social calls. Some mornings you rope in a sister or child to help twist your hair into place, trading turns like some sort of Victorian assembly line. French braids, Dutch braids, crown braids, each more complex than the last. A single misstep, and you start again from scratch, swearing softly and glancing at the clock. For formal occasions, curling is non-negotiable. Enter the curling iron, a menacing metal rod heated on the stove and wielded with equal parts hope and fear. The temperature is always a gamble. Too cold, and your curls droop in defeat. Too hot, and you're left with a singed patch and the lingering aroma of burnt hair for the rest of the week. If you're lucky, you get uniform ringlets. If you're not, you just say you're ahead of the next Parisian trend. Humidity, meanwhile, is the ever-present adversary. Summer brings frizz, rain brings collapse, and winter brings static electricity strong enough to spark a small fire. You try to compensate with hair oils, castor, coconut, or whatever Aunt Edna swears by. Pins and combs secure everything in place, or at least pretend to. By mid-morning, a hat helps hide the worst of the chaos, provided you can keep it from sliding off or flattening your hard-won curls. Cleaning your hair is a project reserved for weekends, new moons, or whenever the dust finally overpowers your patience. Shampoo as you know it doesn't exist, so you make do with soap, egg yolks, or a little vinegar rinse, which leaves your hair shiny, squeaky, and vaguely salad-scented. You scrub at the kitchen sink or in a tin tub, then wait half the day for your hair to dry, no blow dryers here, just the slow march of time and, if you're lucky, a patch of sunshine. Accessories are essential: ribbons, barrettes, tortoiseshell combs, and, for special occasions, fake flowers or tiny jewels. Sometimes, in a fit of creativity, you might try weaving a fresh sprig of lavender or rosemary into your braids. Whether it adds to your elegance or makes you smell like the root cellar is a matter of opinion. Despite the struggle, hair is a point of pride and sometimes rivalry. You exchange tips with friends, marvel at neighbours' glossy tresses, and sigh at your own reflection on a bad day. If all else fails, you blame the weather or the water, or invoke that tried-and-true defence inspired by Paris. In 1880s, America hair care is more than vanity. It's a ritual, a social contract, and an ever-renewing exercise in patience. You end each day by unpinning a small mountain of bobby pins, braids uncoiling with a sigh, and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow's humidity will be merciful. But whatever the forecast, you'll wake up ready to do battle again, because in the end, even impossible hair deserves its moment of glory. Clothes shopping means poring over catalogues, sewing your own dress, or negotiating with a stern seamstress who doubts your taste and your budget. The idea of popping down to the mall and emerging with a whole new wardrobe in an hour is about as fantastical as indoor plumbing for most women in 1880s America. Shopping for clothes is an event, a journey, and sometimes a profound exercise in disappointment. The journey usually begins with a battered mail-order catalogue, Sears, Montgomery Ward, or maybe a thick local circular, its pages soft and crinkled from frequent use. You pore over hand-drawn illustrations, imagining yourself in ruffled skirts and high-necked blouses, then glance at the price and recalculate what you could sell, or possibly pawn, to make that fantasy a reality. Most of the time, the catalogue is just for inspiration. The truth is, new clothes are expensive and budgets are more wishful thinking than reality. Instead of placing an order, you start by rooting through the family trunk, eyeing old dresses and outgrown coats with a calculating gaze. If you're lucky, you'll find a forgotten length of fabric or a dress that only needs slight alteration, a phrase that covers everything from replacing all the buttons to turning it completely inside out and pretending it's new. For many, the needle is mightier than the dollar. Sewing your own dress isn't just a hobby, it's a survival skill. Patterns are traded like gold among friends and neighbours, but every cut is a risk. Fabric is precious, mistakes are permanent, and seam rippers are mostly a luxury of future generations. You measure twice, cut once, and hope for the best. The hum of the sewing machine, if you have one, is a modern marvel. Otherwise, it's you and a needle, hunched over the kitchen table late into the night, stitching by lamplight as you try not to prick your finger on the 50th hem of the month. If sewing isn't an option, or your last homemade attempt ended in tears and cursing, you face the formidable seamstress. She's a woman with sharp scissors, sharper eyes, and the unshakable ability to make you question your own taste. You arrive at her shop with a drawing, some fabric, and a heart full of hope. She glances at your sketch, raises one eyebrow, and suggests 3 improvements before you can protest. Negotiations are intense. She points out the price of lace, the labour involved in piping, and whether or not your modern taste will scandalise the church picnic. The final result is often a compromise between what you want, what you can afford, and what she's willing to put her reputation behind. Let's not forget hand-me-downs, family relics passed along with a blend of generosity and resignation. You graciously accept Aunt Martha's velvet skirt, knowing it will need mending, letting out, or at least 5 rounds with a lint brush. Children's clothes are patched and repatched, dresses let out at the seams, or hemmed up and down to fit the next in line. Fashion is less about keeping up with the times, and more about keeping up with growth spurts and unpredictable mud puddles. Accessories, those are scavenged and hoarded. Ribbons are ironed and reused until they're more memory than fabric. Hats are freshened with new trim, or if times are especially tight, repurposed from whatever isn't nailed down in the parlour. Stockings are darned until the darning outweighs the original material, and through it all hope springs eternal. Maybe next year you'll have a new bonnet, maybe the store will have a sale, maybe your own stitchwork will finally look as tidy as the catalogue's drawings, or maybe you'll simply pin a lace collar over last year's faded bodice and declare it the latest style from Paris, because if 1880s women excelled at anything, it was making do and making it look intentional. In the end, shopping for clothes is about creativity, thrift, and patience. You may not have the fanciest wardrobe, but every stitch, every patch, and every carefully chosen button is a testament to ingenuity and to the unbreakable spirit of women who could turn hope and a little fabric into something beautiful. Evenings mean piano music, reading aloud, parlour games, and pretending you didn't just lose at whist again. After the sun sets and the chores are finally, mercifully done, the parlour transforms from a polite museum of antimacassars and ornamental ferns into the beating heart of family entertainment. There is no radio, no television, and the only thing streaming is the occasional cold draft from a loose window pane. Yet, somehow, the possibilities feel endless, so long as you have a little creativity, a deck of cards, and the willingness to laugh at yourself when things inevitably go sideways. Someone, usually the child with the least patience for dishes, volunteers to play the piano. The instrument dominates one corner of the room, slightly out of tune and prone to the odd sticky key, but precious all the same. A parade of family members take turns plunking out the classics. Oh, Susanna, Aurelie, or whatever sheet music hasn't been chewed by the family cat. If there's a guest with actual talent, everyone gathers close, feigning nonchalance but secretly hoping for something that will drown out Uncle Henry's creative improvisations. Reading aloud is another staple of the evening. The family gathers around the lamplight, kerosene, with its own particular aroma and the occasional threatening flicker, while someone with a clear voice takes up the latest chapter from a borrowed novel or the local newspaper. You listen with rapt attention, except for the youngest, who inevitably nods off and is carried up to bed with a sticky face and a head full of half-remembered adventure. The reader's dramatic pauses, ill-fated accents, and thunderous whispering of plot twists are all part of the fun. But nothing brings the family together like parlour games, those raucous competitive rituals where the stakes are low, but the pride is very, very high. Whist is a favourite, and you keep score with the gravitas of a championship judge, even as you pretend not to care when you lose, for the fourth night in a row. Charades, Blind Man's Bluff, and the Minister's Cat are guaranteed to provoke giggles, sibling alliances, and the occasional strategic tripping of a rival. On especially mischievous nights, practical jokes take centre stage. Someone will inevitably slip a whoopee cushion under a cushion, swap the sugar with salt, or hide a frog in an unsuspecting sibling's shoe. The results are predictably chaotic. Laughter, shrieks, and a round of stern parental warnings that are quickly forgotten the next time someone gets a bright idea involving a bucket of water and a half-open door. If there's company, you break out your best manners and your best gossip. Tales are told of neighbours' misadventures, mysterious noises in the night, and the time Mrs. Carter's cow escaped and led half the children on a wild chase through the garden. No one is safe from gentle ribbing, but it's all in good fun, and sometimes a clever way to settle scores from earlier card games. Entertainment isn't just about fun, it's about connection. These evenings create the stories you'll retell for years, the night the lamp went out mid-song, the time you accidentally tore your dress mid-curtsy, or the game of I Spy that devolved into an earnest debate over what exactly counted as something blue. There's pride in your family's repertoire of party tricks, in Aunt May's recitations, and in the way everyone comes together when the harmonica comes out for a final, slightly off-key lullaby. By bedtime, you're weary but happy, mind swirling with music, stories, and the echo of laughter. The parlour returns to its daytime quiet, the piano lid closed and the lamp turned low. Maybe you lost at whist, maybe your joke landed flat, but it doesn't matter, because in the 1880s, entertainment is homemade, heartfelt, and proof that even the simplest pleasures can fill a home with joy. Cooking is a full-body experience. Recipes are vague, measurements are in handfuls, and the oven is always too hot or too cold, never just right. Step into a typical 1880s kitchen, and you're stepping into the command centre of household survival, a place where science, guesswork, and wishful thinking collide. The room is equal parts bustling workshop and battlefield, every surface covered with flour, cast iron pans, or the occasional wandering chicken looking for spilled crumbs. At the centre is the mighty wood-burning stove, a temperamental beast that's as likely to burn your biscuits as it is to undercook your stew, sometimes in the very same meal. Recipes, if you're lucky enough to have them written down, read less like instructions and more like cryptic riddles. Add a teacup of sugar, one might say, or a walnut-sized lump of butter. Good luck figuring out whose teacup and what size walnut. Much of your know-how comes from watching mothers and grandmothers eyeball everything, their fingers able to judge dough readiness by touch alone. If you ask for a measurement, you'll get a shrug and a story about the time Aunt Hattie forgot the salt and nobody noticed until dessert. Meal prep starts early and ends late. There's dough to knead, meat to salt, potatoes to peel, and firewood to haul, not to mention the endless parade of pans to scrub after every culinary adventure. You're up to your elbows in flour, apron already streaked with something sticky, and the air smells of coffee, onions, and whatever is slowly stewing on the back burner. The kitchen is warm in winter, an oven in summer, and always the gathering place for children and animals hoping for a taste test. Ovens, for their part, are more adversary than ally. There's no temperature dial, just the hand test. Stick your hand in and see if you can count to 3 without crying. Too cool? Wait and try again. Too hot? Leave the oven door open and hope a passing breeze will help. Breads are scorched on the bottom, cakes come out as sunken mysteries, and pies are either molten or barely warmed through. Every meal is a wager with fate and firewood. The pantry is stocked with what you grew, bartered, or, in a rare stroke of luck, bought at the general store. Canned fruits and pickles sit beside sacks of beans, barrels of flour and onions strung up like garlic rosaries. You guard your spices like treasure, doling out cinnamon or cloves with a caution that would make a miser proud. If the recipe calls for something you don't have, well, substitution is the name of the game. Apples for pears, cornstarch for flour, a cheerful lye for fresh cream. Kitchen tools are simple: a sturdy rolling pin, sometimes also used for discipline, a heavy skillet that's never quite clean, knives that need sharpening, and a set of mismatched spoons. You whip cream with a wire whisk and churn butter with a contraption that looks suspiciously like a punishment device from a medieval fair. The only electric thing in sight is a hopeful spark of ingenuity as you jury-rig the cooling rack to hold one more pie. Children swirl in and out of the kitchen, hoping to lick the spoon or sneak a raw potato. Older children are pressed into service, chopping, peeling, and learning the secret of keeping soup from boiling over. You field questions, dodge elbows, and occasionally chase a chicken out the door, all while keeping an eye on the rising bread and the ever-present threat of running out of lard. When dinner is finally served, you breathe a sigh of relief. Some dishes are triumphs, others disasters, but either way, plates are cleaned and compliments are paid, sometimes through gritted teeth. In the 1880s kitchen, perfection is impossible, and satisfaction is measured by full bellies and tired smiles. Your hopes may have died with the burnt biscuits, but you'll rise tomorrow, flour-dusted and optimistic to try again. After all, there's always another meal waiting, another recipe to decipher, and another day to wrestle with the stove. Romance is a high-stakes game of glances, letters, and pretending you're not interested. Privacy is as rare as indoor plumbing. In the 1880s, love is both an open secret and an Olympic-level exercise in subtlety. Forget dating apps, late-night texts, or even a leisurely stroll alone with your chosen beau. Every stage of courtship unfolds under the watchful gaze of family, neighbours, and anyone else with a keen eye for scandal or simply nothing better to do. The path from friendship to courtship to marriage is littered with etiquette traps, missed signals, and a surprising number of floral metaphors. It all starts with the look. Maybe you catch someone's eye across the church pew, at the general store, or during a barn dance. There's a shy glance, a blush, and maybe, if you're feeling bold, a fleeting smile. Nothing is said outright. Everything is implied. If the family approves, or if the young man is determined enough, he may call on you at home, which means sitting rigidly in the best parlour chair while your mother just happens to darn socks in the next room. Letters are the lifeblood of 1880s romance. With no phone and precious few unsupervised meetings, you craft your affections on paper. Every letter is a masterpiece of coded language, equal parts poetry and plausible deniability. I admired your garden yesterday. Really means I hope you noticed me. And Mother sends her regards as secret code for Mother read this before I did. You save each letter in a battered box tied with ribbon and reread them by lamplight, memorizing every phrase and searching for hidden meaning. Chaperones are everywhere, acting as a living, breathing barrier between you and temptation. A walk in the park? Bring your little brother? A buggy ride? Better have Aunt Hilda in the back seat pretending not to listen, while actually writing her own novel in her head. The presence of a chaperone keeps everything above board, but also ensures that any real conversation takes place in hushed tones or carefully staged whispers while she's distracted. Social gatherings are both blessing and curse. The barn dance or church picnic is your best chance to interact, provided you keep a safe 6 inches of daylight between you and your suitor at all times. A glance, a compliment on your dress, a promise to save the next dance, each gesture is fraught with meaning and risk. Couples have been known to court for months before ever holding hands, and when it finally happens, the shock is such that you wonder if lightning will strike you both down on the spot. Parents and family are not just spectators, they are active participants scrutinizing every move. Mothers watch for signs of impropriety. Did he glance at your ankles? While fathers may question your suitor's intentions, occupation, and, if he's particularly old-fashioned, his hat. Younger siblings serve as spies and informants, ready to report any deviation from proper decorum for the price of a cookie. Breaking off a courtship is a delicate operation, requiring as much planning as starting one. You can't simply say, "It's not you, it's me." Instead, you become too busy, letters become less frequent, and eventually the would-be couple drifts apart, often with a sigh of relief from at least one parent. Eventually, if all goes well, the courtship becomes official, engagement is announced, letters become less coded, but still pass through 3 family members before reaching you, and everyone relaxes slightly. Now the talk turns to trousseaux, wedding china, and whether the church organist will actually play the right song. In 1880s America, romance is a dance of patience and protocol, filled with yearning, creativity, and more than a few logistical nightmares. Yet, for all its constraints, the excitement is undeniable. Every note, every glance, every secret smile carries the electricity of possibility. In a world where privacy is scarce, the smallest gesture can mean everything, and love, somehow, finds a way. If you work, you're a teacher, shopgirl, or very brave typist. Pay is low, respect is lower, and the dress code is functionally uncomfortable. Stepping out into the world of work as a woman in 1880s, America means wading into uncharted territory, one petticoat at a time. For most women, employment isn't a choice, it's an economic necessity. Every dollar you earn is a dollar your family needs, and every hour spent working is an hour spent defying a long list of social expectations and proper roles. Forget power suits or corner offices. Here, your uniform is a high-necked blouse, stiff skirt, aching feet, and a smile that says you're grateful for the opportunity to prove you can do twice the work for half the pay. Teaching is the respectable profession. If you call wrangling a classroom full of energetic children, armed with nothing but a ruler and the threat of a visit to the principal, respectable. Your days begin before sunrise, prepping lessons, and end well after dark as you grade papers by lamplight. The schoolhouse is drafty in winter and stifling in summer. The blackboard is never quite clean, and your salary barely covers board and a new bonnet. If you're unmarried, you might even be required to live with a local family to preserve your reputation. Forget after-school cocktails. You settle for after-school silence, nursing sore throats and the hope that at least one child remembers their multiplication tables tomorrow. Other women find work as shopgirls, clerking in general stores or dry goods emporiums. Your hours are long, and you're on your feet from dawn to dusk, fetching ribbons, measuring bolts of cloth, and fending off the attentions of shop boys with more confidence than sense. The pay is just enough to buy fabric for a new dress every now and then, if you're careful with your lunch money. You're expected to be polite, efficient, and always presentable, which means keeping your hair pinned and your patience even more so. For the bold and the lucky, there's office work, typing, filing, or answering the endless stream of correspondence for lawyers, businessmen, and railroad tycoons. The typewriter is both a marvel and a menace. Your fingers grow nimble as you rattle out letters, contracts, and invoices at record speed, hoping for approval and maybe even a tiny raise. The office is a world of men, where you tread carefully and speak softly, where every coffee run is a chance to overhear news or snag a little office gossip. Respect? It's doled out in teaspoons, and you'll need to work twice as hard just to get a seat at the battered communal lunch table. Factory work is the option for those with fewer choices and stronger constitutions. Mills and textile plants offer long hours, deafening noise, and wages that vanish as quickly as they arrive. You stand shoulder to shoulder with other women, your hands working quickly and your eyes always on the foreman. Safety is an afterthought. Camaraderie is a necessity. You swap stories, share lunch, and watch out for each other when management isn't looking. The rules of the workplace are written by men, enforced by matrons, and whispered about by neighbours. Every misstep, too much laughter, too little decorum, a hem that's a shade too short, becomes fodder for the rumour mill. You learn to move quietly, speak plainly, and never complain, at least not where anyone important can hear you. Still, work outside the home is a lifeline. It's freedom, independence, and sometimes a doorway to something bigger. Maybe you send money home. Maybe you save for your own bicycle. Or maybe you just enjoy the simple pride of a day's wage tucked safely in your reticule. In 1880s, America, women's work is undervalued and underpaid. But that doesn't make it any less vital or any less heroic. And every time you clock out, sore but satisfied, you're blazing a trail for the next woman who dares to work outside the home, functionally uncomfortable dress and all. Evenings are spent reading, playing cards, or listening to the latest gossip. Every story told is half truth, half warning. After the last chore is done and the dinner dishes are stacked, or at least hidden under a towel until morning, the house finally shifts from chaos to a sort of cosy makeshift peace. The fire is stoked, the lamps are lit, and the family, by some small miracle, finds itself gathered in the same room. No one running outside after a stray chicken, no one hiding in the kitchen to escape homework. It's the closest thing to a daily ritual, the gathering of survivors, recounting the day's battles and bracing for tomorrow's. The options for entertainment are limited, but that only adds to the charm. There's a deck of cards, dog-eared and missing the 3 of clubs, which everyone suspects the dog of eating last spring, and a stack of battered board games that somehow always ends with someone accusing someone else of cheating. Whist is the favourite for the grown-ups. Rules are enforced with the seriousness of a Supreme Court hearing. The younger children gravitate to checkers, while the eldest, always a little too serious, suggests chess and then sulks when no one wants to play. Storytelling, though, is where the real magic happens. Someone, often the matriarch, sometimes the uncle who swears he met Jesse James, settles into the best chair and launches into a tale. It could be a ghost story, a family legend, or a half-remembered bit of news twisted into something epic. The kids listen with wide eyes, hanging on every word, especially when the story involves local characters or the ever-popular, and that's why you never go near the well after dark. It's education by folklore, a lesson in history and a healthy dose of subtle warning all wrapped into one. If there's music in the house, it's time to play. Maybe someone pulls out a fiddle or harmonica, or everyone joins in a round of singing, harmonies questionable, enthusiasm never in doubt. The piano, if you have one, gets pressed into service for sing-alongs, sometimes accompanied by improvised percussion from spoons and tabletops. Songs about lost love, hard times, and the beauty of home echo through the parlour, keeping spirits up and worries at bay. Gossip, of course, weaves through every conversation. The latest news from town, the questionable fashion choices of a neighbour, or the mysterious package delivered to the widow barn's porch, nothing is too small to dissect. Each retelling is juicier than the last, and by the time the story makes its way back to its subject, it's grown an extra subplot and at least one new villain. Children listen and learn. Information is currency, and the art of the subtle eavesdrop is a vital life skill. Survival, in the end, is the backdrop of every gathering. Parents quietly compare the state of the pantry, tally supplies, and make mental notes of tomorrow's work. Children too feel the undertones. Who's healthy, who's struggling, what winter might bring. But within these walls, family time offers sanctuary, a rare stretch of warmth and laughter before sleep. You teach the kids their letters over a round of hangman, let them help with mending, and tuck them in with a bedtime story that's just scary enough to discourage midnight snacks. As the fire burns low and the lamp flickers, you share one last round of quiet conversation. Plans for tomorrow, whispered hopes, the promise of pancakes if everyone behaves, You savour these moments, simple, fleeting, and woven together by the relentless, loving effort it takes to keep a family afloat. Because in 1880s America, family time is never just recreation. It's a nightly act of survival, resilience, and gentle joy, proof that even on the hardest days, togetherness can be enough. The law rarely takes your side. Property? Unlikely. Voting? Keep dreaming. But you know which neighbour just got a new piano. In 1880s America, women's relationship with the law is a study in contradictions, officially invisible in many arenas, yet responsible for nearly every detail of daily life. You can manage a household, raise a family, run a business behind the scenes, and outwit half the town, but when it comes to legal recognition, you're suddenly a ghost with very strong opinions about curtains. Property law is an especially tricky maze. If you're unmarried, you can, in theory, own property or sign a contract. Get married, though, and suddenly your legal existence folds neatly into your husband's like a sheet fresh off the line. Coverture is the rule. Your husband gets your property, your wages, and your legal standing, all bundled together as part of the wedding vows, right next to in sickness and in health. Your dowry, if you have one, is managed for you by someone else, which is polite code for you'll never see it again unless your husband is particularly generous or forgetful. If you inherit anything, it's usually handled by a male relative on your behalf. Apparently, women's brains can't be trusted with land deeds, but you're considered reliable enough to manage livestock, children, and all household finances. When it comes to voting, the door is firmly closed. The suffrage movement is a distant thunder in some cities, a polite dinner party scandal in others. Newspapers occasionally run editorials about women wanting the vote, usually illustrated with terrifying cartoons of mothers abandoning babies for ballot boxes, or wives lecturing hapless husbands about the gold standard. You might know a local troublemaker who signs a petition or, gasp, speaks at a rally. But for most, participation means quietly reading the news and arguing about it with your friends over needlework. Legal recourse for anything, divorce, abuse, unfair wages, is more hope than reality. Divorce is possible but rarely easy, requiring proof of cause, which means more paperwork and public confession than most can bear. Custody of children usually defaults to the father, or, if he's deemed unsuitable, to his family. The legal advice is clear. Avoid divorce if you can, and if you can't, prepare for a fight that makes scrubbing laundry look like a vacation. Workplace laws are equally indifferent. If you work outside the home, your employer sets the rules, from wages to working hours, and complaints are handled with a shrug. Equal pay? A joke? Harassment? Not a concept. Your best weapon is a network of friends, a sharp tongue, and a quiet reputation for not putting up with nonsense. Occasionally, a factory or shop girl makes headlines by suing for back wages or unfair dismissal. But these are exceptions that mostly serve as cautionary tales to others. And yet, beneath the surface, things are shifting. You hear rumours of women doctors opening practices in the city, women lawyers advocating for battered wives, women's clubs gathering to discuss more than just embroidery. The Women's Christian Temperance Union and other reform groups are gaining ground, fighting for everything from clean water to the right to speak in public without a male escort. The law isn't on your side yet, but more women are determined to make themselves impossible to ignore. In the meantime, you follow the unspoken rules, take pride in small victories, and keep a sharp eye on the neighbour's new piano. Because sometimes, the only power available is social influence, strategic alliances, and knowing which pie recipe will get you invited to the right table. By the end of the century, the world will change. But here, in the 1880s, women and the law are locked in a complicated dance. One step forward, 2 steps back, but always moving, always dreaming. And every whispered conversation, every bold signature on a petition, is a small rebellion in the march toward reluctant progress. Travel is a commitment, carriages rattle, trains are drafty, and every trip means packing food, water, and a deep sense of resignation. In 1880s America, travel isn't a quick jaunt to the store or a convenient weekend escape. It's a logistical marathon and a test of patience that begins long before you even set foot outside your front door. Every journey, even to the next town, requires more planning and preparation than most modern people put into an international vacation. You start with a checklist. Who's watching the house? Who's feeding the livestock? Has anyone seen my travelling bonnet? Let's begin with carriages. Let's begin with the family wagon, grand stagecoach, or rattling buggy is your only choice if you're staying relatively local. Suspension technology is, at best, a rumour, at worst, a cruel joke. The roads are a mosaic of mud, ruts and surprises. Each jolt threatens to launch your hat and your dignity into the nearest ditch. You pack a cushion, a blanket, and a stoic attitude, bracing for bumps that test the limits of your spine. Dust coats everything in summer, mud creeps up your hems in spring, and in winter the wheels freeze and the wind sneaks in from every direction. Car sickness is the least of your worries. There's also the constant threat of runaway chickens or, heaven forbid, a loose wheel. If you're venturing farther afield, the train is the cutting-edge option. Trains are modern marvels connecting cities and towns with a speed that would dazzle your grandmother. Still, every ride is a noisy, rattling adventure. You start with a wait at the depot, tickets clutched, children in tow, and an eye on the clouds for sudden rain. Once aboard, you're greeted by a chorus of clanking wheels, clouds of coal smoke, and the distinct possibility of sharing your compartment with a chicken, 3 hat boxes, and a salesman peddling questionable elixirs. Seats are upright, upholstery is scratchy, and there's never enough room for your feet, your suitcase, or your opinions about proper ventilation. Drafts are inevitable, and you quickly learn the art of layering shawls and coats to keep the cold at bay. If you're lucky, you'll claim a window seat, though the view is mostly blurred countryside and the occasional startled cow. Train bathrooms are a study in terror, best avoided unless truly desperate. The journey's rhythm is a relentless clatter, a symphony of metal and steam, punctuated by stops at stations where porters rush by, dogs bark, and someone always forgets a bag on the platform. No matter the mode of transport, food is a challenge. There are no rest stops or convenience stores. You pack bread, cold chicken, hard-boiled eggs, and an optimistic jar of pickles that will probably leak before noon. Water is brought in a heavy jug, tea in a tin, and if you're really lucky, someone thought to pack a lemon to stave off the taste of railroad dust. Crumbs get everywhere, and someone always asks, "Are we there yet?" before you've even left the city limits. Travel sickness, in one form or another, is a universal experience. Children get pale, adults grow irritable, and even the family dog looks like he's questioning his life choices. Remedies range from mint tea to stern advice about watching the horizon, though nothing truly prepares you for the unique discomfort of bumping along a dirt road in a fully loaded carriage. Arriving at your destination is always a triumph. You tumble out, aching and dusty, your hat askew, and your patience thin. There's no guarantee your trunk has arrived, or even the right trunk, and accommodations range from drafty inns to the kindness of relatives whose guest bed is an adventure in itself. In the 1880s, travel is rarely glamorous, often chaotic, and always memorable. Each journey is an act of stubborn optimism, a declaration that despite every obstacle, you'll get where you're going, even if it takes all day, 3 sandwiches, and the last shreds of your resolve. And when you finally do arrive, you swear you'll never travel again until next time. Finally, bedtime. You unlace, unwind, and collapse into bed, surrounded by the quiet victories and losses of another relentless day. You stare at the ceiling, wondering how you'll do it all again tomorrow, and somehow, you know you will. The ritual of getting ready for bed in 1880s, America begins with a sigh and ends with a prayer that no one wakes you before dawn. The house gradually dims as lamps are snuffed, the echoes of laughter and clattering dishes replaced by the gentle hush of night. Your body aches in places you didn't know existed this morning. A dull throb from hauling laundry, the lingering pinch of a corset worn a few hours too long, the telltale soreness in your hands from kneading dough or sewing seams. You start by unlacing yourself from the day, literally. Removing a corset is a full-body experience, requiring patience, a flexible arm, and perhaps a little assistance from whoever happens to pass by. Each loosened lace is a small act of rebellion and relief. As your ribs expand and your lungs fill with air, you marvel that breathing deeply can feel so luxurious. Your skin bears the marks of the boning and pressure, faint red lines that fade as quickly as your memory of how the day began. Next come the layers: overskirt, underskirt, petticoat, blouse, stockings, each peeled away and folded, or at least draped over the nearest chair in something approaching order. Maybe you catch your reflection in the wavy glass of the bedroom mirror, hair escaping its pins, cheeks smudged with flour, eyes rimmed with fatigue. There's a kind of satisfaction in the mess, a reminder that you've truly lived another day. Washing up is a pared-down affair. The basin of cool water greets you again, and you sponge away the dust, sweat, and stubborn remnants of lye soap from earlier. If you're lucky, there's a fresh towel and a little lavender water to soothe your tired skin. You brush your teeth with baking soda, pin your hair into a loose braid, and rub a little liniment into your aching shoulders, muttering about the price of progress and the need for softer pillows. Climbing into bed is a reward in itself. The mattress, still uneven and stuffed with straw or horsehair, somehow feels more forgiving in the dark. You slide under a stack of patchwork quilts, each one a mosaic of old clothes and older stories, stitched together by the hands of women who survived days just like this one. The sheets are cool against your skin, and for a moment you simply listen. The creak of the house settling, the soft breathing of those you love, the distant chorus of night insects. Your mind, of course, refuses to quiet immediately. You replay the day's highlights and mishaps, the biscuits that burned, the child who finally tied her own shoes, the neighbour's gossip, the tiny triumph of fixing a tear with a nearly invisible stitch. You make a mental note of tomorrow's chores, half smiling at the certainty that the list will only grow longer by breakfast. If you're the praying type, you offer up a word of thanks for strength, for resilience, for the courage to face it all again, or maybe you simply close your eyes and let gratitude find you in the quiet. The last sensation is a wave of exhaustion, unapologetic, deserved, and all-encompassing. And as you drift off, you realize this is what endurance looks like. Not grand gestures or dramatic victories, but 1,000 quiet moments of persistence, love, and hope strung together day after day. Tomorrow will come, the rooster will crow, and the world will expect you to rise. But for now, you rest, knowing that whatever the day demanded, you met it, with humour, grit, and just enough grace to try again. Sleep, at last, is yours. Once a month, your body launches a hostile takeover, and let's just say the world is not here for it. Sanitary pads? Meet folded rags and safety pins. Sympathy? Only if you count Aunt Martha's suggestion to take the air. You carry on, doing laundry, minding kids, baking pies, while pretending your uterus isn't waging a low-grade revolution against the rest of you. The 1880s approach to menstruation is best described as deal with it and don't talk about it. There are no painkillers on the shelf, no heating pads, and certainly no day off. You make do with what you have, which in this case is a small stack of flannel or linen rags, carefully laundered and folded each month, stored in a discreet box or tucked away in the corner of a dresser drawer. If you're lucky, you have enough to get through your cycle without an emergency wash, but if not, you become adept at stealthily scrubbing and drying your supplies when no one else is looking. Privacy is an illusion, so timing is everything. Attaching these makeshift pads is a game of creative engineering and risk management. A well-placed safety pin might keep things in place, or it might decide to open at the worst possible moment. Elastic belts, if you can afford one, are a rare luxury, but most women rely on determination and careful layering of undergarments. The fear of leaks, stains, or an unexpected incident is a silent companion, lurking in every sudden laugh or jolt from a runaway child. Cramps. Those are simply female complaints and are to be handled with a stiff upper lip. Hot water bottles are reserved for the ill, not the inconvenienced. Most advice boils down to keeping busy and not thinking about it. If you're really struggling, you might receive a kind word or a cup of weak tea, but more often you'll be told to take the air, as if a brisk walk is the answer to everything from existential dread to full-body revolt. Mood swings are neither acknowledged nor tolerated. You grit your teeth through irritability, exhaustion, and the occasional urge to bite the head off the next person who asks what's for dinner. If you're brave enough to mention your monthly woes, the reaction will range from hushed concern, "Don't let the menfolk hear," to rolling eyes, and reminders that women have been getting on with it since Eve. There's a prevailing belief that menstruation is both shameful and unremarkable, a paradox that leaves you feeling invisible and exposed at the same time. Despite it all, the work doesn't stop. There's laundry to haul, meals to prepare, bread to knead, and children to keep out of trouble. You shuffle through chores, occasionally pausing to catch your breath or press a hand to your aching lower back, hoping no one notices the wince. Life goes on at its usual relentless pace, and you keep up because the alternative is letting someone else fold the sheets the wrong way or burn the biscuits. Once a month, you also become your family's unofficial expert on stealth and resourcefulness. You learn to change and wash rags discreetly, time chores around your worst cramps and improvise with whatever is at hand. Sometimes you wonder if other women have it easier, or if the stories about rest cures and fainting couches in the city are true. But here, in your corner of the world, you manage as best you can, occasionally exchanging a knowing glance with a sister, friend or neighbour who's also battling her own monthly rebellion. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the siege ends. You wash, dry, and stash away your rags until next time, grateful for the return of a body that feels relatively under your own command. There's no celebration, no relief beyond a quiet sigh, and the certainty that you'll do it all again in a few weeks. In 1880s America, the monthly curse is just another challenge to face with grit, humour, and the silent camaraderie of women everywhere who have always, somehow, found a way to endure. Fashion isn't about comfort, it's a full-contact sport. One year it's all about enormous bustles, the next a hat that could double as a bird sanctuary. You study magazine engravings and sigh, knowing you're 3 trends behind and your only accessory is last week's gravy stain. In 1880s America, keeping up with fashion is like entering a never-ending obstacle course, one lined with frills, traps, and the occasional aggressive feather. Every season, the magazines from Paris and New York arrive, and suddenly, every woman in town is expected to have opinions about the new silhouette or the right way to trim a bodice. You pore over sketches in Godey's Ladies' Book, marvelling at impossibly tiny waists, towers of petticoats, and outfits that would bankrupt a modest family just for the ribbons alone. Let's talk about the bustle, the crowning glory and bane of 1880s fashion. The bustle is a structural wonder, a padded or wire contraption that sits at the back of your skirt, designed to give your figure a shape that, according to fashion experts, mimics a graceful swan. According to everyone else, it's more pack mule after a long winter. Navigating doors, chairs, and crowded parlours with a bustle strapped to your hips is a daily adventure. You learn to pivot sideways through tight spaces, sit at the very edge of seats, and develop a sixth sense for when your bustle is about to knock over Aunt Edna's prized vase. Then there's the issue of sleeves. Some years, sleeves balloon out like you've stuffed bread rolls into your arms. The next, they shrink to constricting tubes that make it impossible to lift a teacup without first unbuttoning half your blouse. Collars rise and fall at the whim of fashion's distant arbiters, alternately threatening to strangle you or leave your neck scandalously exposed to the elements and the judgmental gaze of your neighbour. And hats. Oh, the hats. The bigger, the better, apparently. A proper hat is adorned with bows, feathers, sometimes artificial fruit, and the occasional unfortunate taxidermied bird. You pin it in place with long, lethal hat pins and march out the door hoping that a sudden gust of wind won't launch it into the street. If the hat stays put, you're ahead of the game. If not, you become an impromptu entertainer for the block. Colour is a constant guessing game. Last year's celestial blue is this year's shocking error in judgment. Patterns change so fast that the floral print you painstakingly sewed last spring is already quaint, and your one dark skirt, supposedly timeless, now marks you as a woman who doesn't care. Embellishments pile on. Bows, ribbons, lace, beading, fringe. You spend hours adding new trim to old dresses, hoping to trick people into believing you've embraced the latest style, all while quietly mourning the loss of one less thing you have time to mend. If you're lucky enough to afford a seamstress, you arrive with magazine clippings and a hopeful heart. She examines the sketch, purses her lips, and tells you exactly why it won't suit a woman of your stature. You compromise, settle for half the bows, and end up with something fashionable enough to pass muster, until next season, when you'll do it all over again. The reality, though, is that most women simply make do. You disguise stains with artfully placed brooches, patch holes with contrasting fabric and call it Parisian flair, and pass down dresses from sister to sister until the youngest is the unwitting trendsetter in a decade-old frock. Somewhere in your wardrobe is the one good dress reserved for Sundays, social calls, or the day the photographer finally makes it to town. That dress is lovingly aired, brushed, and accessorized with whatever the season demands, a borrowed shawl, a clever hat, or, on tough days, just your best smile. So, you chase trends as best you can, laugh at the absurdity, and wear your gravy stain like a badge of honour. In the end, 1880s fashion isn't about perfection, it's about survival, creativity, and the unshakable belief that somewhere, deep beneath the bows and bustles, you're every bit as grand as the ladies in the magazines. Social media? You've got paper and ink. Every juicy detail and secret grudge gets poured into letters and diaries longhand. You develop handwriting cramps and a vivid suspicion your younger siblings are reading every page. In the 1880s, the written word is both your confessional and your lifeline. A day's drama, from burned biscuits to accidental flirtations, finds its way onto the crisp, lined pages of your diary, the one tucked beneath your pillow or hidden under a stack of old sewing patterns. Privacy, as always, is relative. You lock your diary with a tiny brass key, confident that it will deter the younger children, never mind that half the family already knows where you keep the spare. Letter writing, meanwhile, is an Olympic sport. With friends scattered across farms and towns and relatives who view gossip as a birthright, every woman is her own news bureau. You select your finest paper, usually cream or pale blue, sometimes with a faint scent of violets, and sharpen your pen with a practiced flick of the wrist. The inkwell is always slightly crusted, the blotter never quite large enough, and somewhere along the process you inevitably smudge the last line and utter a silent curse. A proper letter is a work of art and a subtle code. You weave updates about the weather, household triumphs, and minor scandals between lines that only your closest friend could decipher. I ran into Mrs. Foster at the store, you write, which everyone knows means, brace yourself, something's afoot. Expressions of longing or irritation must be couched in polite phrases. Your true feelings are for the diary, where maddening means furious and delightful might actually mean barely tolerable. Handwriting is a point of pride and a source of suffering. You practice loops, flourishes, and that delicate slant everyone admires in the schoolhouse. Yet, after 3 pages, your wrist aches and the ink stains your fingers. A small price to pay for being heard across counties and state lines. Letters fly back and forth, some taking weeks to arrive, each a little piece of home from the outside world. The mailman becomes a figure of desperate hope, delivering bundles of news, newsprint, and the occasional marriage proposal, or rumour thereof. Journaling is less formal, more immediate. The diary is your sounding board, therapist, and silent audience. Here, you record everything: the weather, your hopes for a new dress, your fears about the upcoming harvest, your suspicions about Cousin Clara's sudden interest in the neighbour's son. You detail household squabbles and victories, make lists of grievances, and sometimes try your hand at poetry, usually late at night when the house is finally quiet and the only light is the flicker of your bedside lamp. Oversharing is not only tolerated, it's a way of life. Everyone's letters are treasures, everyone's diaries are maps of the heart, but trust is hard won. You suspect your siblings of snooping rightly most of the time. You devise clever codes for the juiciest tidbits, or simply invent elaborate stories as a trap for prying eyes. Sometimes the stories are so vivid and detailed that they take on a life of their own, growing in the retelling until you almost believe you once danced with a prince at the county fair. When news arrives from afar, a friend's wedding, a new baby, a distant tragedy, the family gathers to read the letter aloud, pausing to debate every ambiguous sentence and speculate wildly about what's been left unsaid. You savour these moments, the warmth of shared laughter and collective gasp at a particularly daring anecdote. For those brief minutes, the world feels smaller, troubles lighter, and the joys of connection outweigh even the worst of handwriting cramps. In the end, letters and diaries are more than just records. They are a patchwork of emotion, a legacy of hope, gossip, and resilience. You tuck away your filled diaries and saved letters, knowing someday someone will read them, and marvel that so much life and so many secrets could be carried by ink and paper alone. And you smile, because even without social media your story will be told, one smudged page at a time. The town dance is less about romance, and more about surviving 2 hours of forced merriment in shoes that could double as medieval torture devices. You smile, curtsy, and try not to step on anyone's toes or dignity. The punch is questionable, the music is lively, and the gossip lasts all year. To understand the social calendar of 1880s America, you need to understand the ritual of the party. Dances are the highlight, a rare opportunity to mingle with neighbours, potential suitors, and your own extended family, all under the watchful gaze of chaperones and the burning judgment of Mrs. Abernathy, who has not missed a dance since Lincoln was in office. The days before a dance are spent in a frenzy of preparation, Dresses must be mended, shoes polished, ribbons ironed, and, if fortune favours you, a hat borrowed from a more fashionable cousin. Your mother issues stern instructions about posture and manners, while your siblings threaten to share your childhood secrets if you don't agree to save them the last slice of pie. Arriving at the dance is an event in itself. You're deposited at the town hall, the barn, or sometimes the parlour of the wealthiest local family, all transformed with garlands of paper flowers, strings of lanterns, and a band tuning up in the corner. The punch bowl glimmers ominously, already the subject of whispered speculation about who might have improved it with a secret splash of something stronger. The musicians launch into a sprightly tune, and the floor fills with couples, groups, and that one person who is always slightly off the beat. The two-step, the quadrille, the waltz, dances are called out in quick succession. If you're a veteran, you find your rhythm gliding gracefully around the room, avoiding collisions and keeping a practiced smile fixed on your face. If you're new, it's a scramble. You count the beats, listen for shouted instructions, and pray you don't trip over your skirt, your partner, or your own feet. Inevitably, someone spins the wrong way, partners collide, and laughter covers up any bruised egos. Chaperones circle the perimeter, ready to intervene if dancing grows too enthusiastic, or if anyone looks at anyone else with too much interest. Shoes are the real villains. Fashion demands dainty slippers or high-buttoned boots, neither of which is remotely comfortable or suited to hours on a wooden floor. By the second dance, your feet are numb. By the third, you would sell your soul for a patch of bare ground and a foot rub. Yet you persist because to sit out is to risk being labelled not fond of society, a social death sentence for at least the next season. In between dances, the real entertainment unfolds. Conversation is quick, sharp, and heavy with implication. You ask after relatives, praise someone's dress, even if it's borrowed from your own wardrobe, and trade quips about the band's tempo. But beneath the surface, alliances are made, crushes confessed, and rivalries born. Someone is always flirting too obviously. Someone else is caught eavesdropping behind the potted fern. The punch bowl serves as neutral ground, where gossip and lemonade are dispensed in equal measure. As the night wears on, cheeks flush, laughter grows louder and the music swells. The last dances are always the best, just reckless enough to blur the edges of propriety, just joyful enough to forget the blisters. When the final tune fades and coats are retrieved, the party isn't really over. The stories told tonight will be retold and embellished all year. Who danced with whom, who fainted, whose punch was strong enough to curl your hair. You limp home, shoes in hand, head buzzing with music, gossip and relief that you didn't completely disgrace yourself on the dance floor. In 1880s, America parties and dances are more than just recreation. They're social strategy, physical endurance, and a rite of passage, survived with humour, humility, and the faint hope that next time you'll finally master the two-step. As the house finally grows quiet, the lamps turned low and the last chores reluctantly laid to rest, you ease yourself into bed at the end of another very long 1880s day. Your corset is unlaced at last, your hands are sore in that familiar honest way, and your body hums with the deep exhaustion that only comes from doing absolutely everything for everyone. The noise of the day fades, replaced by the soft creak of the house settling, the distant sound of a train whistle, and the gentle knowledge that tomorrow will arrive whether you're ready or not. You've walked through a world without shortcuts, a world where every meal required effort, every clean dress required muscle, and every moment of rest had to be earned. You survived stiff fashions, endless expectations, and a society that asked for grace while offering very little in return. And yet, through all of it, women of the 1880s built lives anyway. They laughed in kitchens, whispered secrets over teacups, raised children, kept households running, and found small, stubborn joys in between the work. So tonight, as you sink into your clean bed with hot water, soft sheets, and the radical luxury of doing nothing at all, maybe take a quiet second to thank the women who came before you, the ones who managed life without modern medicine, without machines to help, and without anyone asking if they were okay. They endured sore backs, heavy skirts, loud expectations, and days that never seemed to end. Because history may be exhausting, uncomfortable, and occasionally ridiculous, but it's also proof of something gentler, that people are resilient, that they adapt, that even in the most demanding lives there's room for humour, for hope, and for rest at the end of the day. So let your breathing slow. Let the world of bustle skirts and boiling wash tubs fade into the distance. You've made it through the day. You are warm. You are safe. And unlike 1882, you don't have to wake up before dawn to churn butter. Sleep well